听专家解读美国升学方案，看美国学习生活点滴，圆美国名校梦想。本节目由美国文美教育集团冠名播出。
大家好，欢迎收看文美集团美国升学直通车。文美集团美国升学直通车是华人网和文美教育集团联合制作播出的北美首档大型的网络直播教育节目。在我们的节目当中，你将会了解到最新最权威的教育资讯，还有升学的建议。无论你是学生还是家长，有任何的美国升学教育问题，都可以给我们留言。首先来介绍一下文美集团。美国文美集团，美国大学申请规划服务第一品牌，20年经验，万博士领衔常春藤顾问团队，中美双顾问模式服务一个学生，按照大学录取学校排名收费，与孩子形成利益共同体。华人老品牌，值得您的信赖。文美集团隆重推出 ACAP 大学专业及职业测评规划管理系统，华人升学机构首创，完美解决华人学生最大升学痛点。人工智能提前锁定大学专业方向，提前2到5年布局申请。有了专业测评系统，孩子的课程规划更清晰，活动更聚焦，文书更有故事感，大学申请更有竞争力。5到11年级学生都可以报名参加测评。文美集团1对1非营利组织成立运营领导力项目，让孩子从参与者变为领导者，真正成长、成人、成才进名校。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。文美集团社会影响力联合国网络义工课程，节省孩子时间，做名校认可的社会影响力，高大上义工。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。今天我们邀请到前宾大的招生官，同时呢也是文美集团的规划部文科的项目主管 Miss Mehr 来和我们聊聊1560的 SAT 也可能会被藤校拒绝，被忽视的推荐信正在拉开录取的差距。有请 Miss Mehr。
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining tonight. I want to start with a question. I want you to think about your last college application conversation, maybe with your child, maybe with your parents, maybe with your counselor. How much of that conversation was about essays? How much was about grades or test scores or activities? And how much was about the recommendation letters? If you're like most families I work with, the answer is almost none. And that is a problem because recommendation letters are one of the most important parts of a top-tier university application. Harvard, Stanford, Yale, MIT, Princeton, Columbia, Duke, Brown, every single one of them requires a letter of recommendations. Most require 2 from teachers and 1 from a school counselor. And admissions officers will tell you over and over again that these letters are critical to how they read your file. But here is the really strange part, which is recommendation letters are the one part of your application that you do not write yourself. And because you do not write them, most students believe that they cannot control them. They think the teacher will write what the teacher writes, and that's pretty much it. But in my opinion, that is completely wrong. And tonight I'm going to show you that you have far more influence over your recommendation letters than you actually realize. You will learn how admissions officers actually read these letters, what they are scanning for, and what separates a polite, forgettable letter from one that genuinely moves the student into that admit pile. I will also walk you through how to choose your recommenders, when and how to ask them, and most importantly, what to give them so they can write the strongest possible letters on your behalf. My goal for this session is that after watching this, you will have a complete playbook to work with. So let's get started. First, I'll cover the hidden weight of the recommendation letters. Let me start by telling you why these letters matter more than more families realize. When an admissions officer at a top university opens your application, they're looking for evidence. Evidence that your grades reflect real learning, evidence that your activities reflect real passion, evidence that you are the kind of person who will contribute to their campus. Almost everything in your application comes from you. Your essays, you wrote them. Your activities list, you chose what to put on it. Your test scores, you took the tests, of course. Your transcripts, well, your teachers gave you those grades, but you didn't curate the document itself. Now, the recommendation letters are different. They're the only part of your application written by an adult who has known you over time, who has watched you in a classroom, who has seen you struggle and also grow. They are, in a sense, the only third party voice in your file. That means they do something nothing else in your application can do. They are corroborating. If your essay claims you love physics, your physics teacher letter either confirms that or does not. If your activities list says you're a leader, your counselor's letter either says, yes, she runs everything in our school, or it says, or it does not say that, or stays politely silent. That silence is what can actually kill the application. Admissions officers will tell you that the strongest applications have what they call alignment. Every part of the file points in the same direction. The grades, the essay, the activities, the recommendations, they all tell the same story about who this person is. When the recommendation letters reinforce the story, it really makes the application strong. When the recommendation letters contradict it or simply fail to support it, the whole file kind of collapses. So this is the stakes. The recommendation letter is not really a formality. It is the ground truth check on everything else you've really said about yourself. Now I will spend a little bit of time talking about what happens when an admissions officer actually picks up your recommendation letter. Here is the reality. An admissions officer at a top university may read between 30 to 50 applications a day during the reading season. They have on average about 8 to 12 minutes to read the application, and that really includes everything: the transcript, the activities, the essay, and the recommendations. So your recommendation letters are not being read line by line. They're being scanned. The admissions officers are really looking for specific signals. And let me tell you what those signals are. The first signal is the language of distinction. Admissions officers are scanning for phrases that indicate exceptional standing, things like X is one of the top students I've taught in my X years. They're the most curious student in my class. I would hire him or her tomorrow if I could. He asked the questions other students in my class would have wished they had asked. These phrases are gold. They tell the admissions officer that this teacher who has seen hundreds of students considers this applicant exceptional and very specific, identifiable way. A letter without any of this language, even if it is positive, is what admissions officers call a polite letter. It does not hurt you, but those polite letters do not help you either. And at a school with a 5% acceptance rate, not hurting you is really not enough. The second signal is specific anecdotes. The best recommendation letters tell stories. A teacher who writes, X is intellectually curious, has really said nothing. A teacher who writes, when we read this X book, the student X stayed after class to discuss with me about understanding on X, and 3 days later, he or she came back with a paper he or she had written on his or her own time, comparing it to X or Y. Now, this is very specific. This is the kind of detail admissions officers remember when they're deciding on who to admit. The third signal is intellectual character. Top universities are not just looking for hardworking students. They're looking for thinkers. Letters that describe how a student engages with ideas, how they challenge their peers, how they connect concepts across disciplines, how they push back on the ideas discussed, or have a respectful dialogue, are far stronger than letters that emphasize work ethic. He or she works hard is not good enough. He or she thinks differently from his or her peers in a way that I've rarely seen is an A+ kind of a letter. It shows intellectual character. The fourth signal, which is very important, is growth. Admissions officers love to see a teacher describe a student's arc over time. The student who came in shy and became a class leader, the student who struggled with calculus in the fall and was teaching his or her peers by spring. Growth is really, really important. It shows resilience and capacity. It really shows that this is a student who will really keep developing in college. The fifth signal, and this is a critical one, is what the teacher chooses to leave out. Admissions officers read carefully, not for what is really said. I mean, not just for what is really said, but for what is absent as well. If a teacher writes a letter that praises a student's work ethic, but never mentions intellectual curiosity, the admissions officers would actually notice that. If a counselor writes about a student's grades but never really about their character, the admissions officers would notice that as well. Silence, in a way, is information for admissions officers as well. And the goal of your recommendation strategy is to really ensure the silences in your letters do not undermine the story you're trying to tell. Now I'm going to spend some time talking about something that not really a lot of people tell you about recommendation letters. The letter is not really written in November of your senior year or October of your senior year or September. The letter is written across your sophomore and junior years in every classroom interaction, every office hour you visit, every essay you turned in. The asking is the easy part. The hard part is being a student worth writing about. So if you're a parent watching this, or even a student watching this who's currently a sophomore or junior, please listen to this section very carefully. The students who get the best recommendation letters are the ones who built real, sustained relationships with at least 2 to 3 teachers before they ever needed to ask. Not, and that's very, very important. What does this actually look like? Let me give you some specific. It looks like going to office hours. Not because you're confused about the homework, but because you read something in class that you're interested in and you want to talk about it. It looks like emailing a teacher a link to an article you saw that connected to what you were learning. It looks like asking a teacher what they're researching, what they're reading, what got them interested in the subject. It could look like writing a final paper that is genuinely your own thinking, not just using class notes. It looks like staying after class for 5 minutes to ask a follow-up question. I worked with a student last year, and for our purposes here, I will call her A, who got into Princeton. Her English teacher's letter was extraordinary. The reason was simple. For 2 years, A had been bringing that teacher books she had finished with notes in the margins, asking what the teacher thought. The teacher knew A's mind. She knew how A would read, how A argued, what A cared about. When she wrote the letter, she could write about the time A came in to argue about X, or time A left a copy of X essay on her desk with a note attached. That letter sounded like a real human being talking about another real human being that she knew very well. And this is something that the admissions officers really crave about. Now, compare that to a different student I worked with. I'll call him B. He had a 1560 SAT and a 4.0. He applied to all the IBs, and unfortunately, he got into none of them. When I read his application later, his teacher recommendations were the real problem. They said, I mean, obviously, we were not able to see them, but he had not really given a cover letter to those teachers, or those teachers did not really know him very well. And primarily after discussion, we and even prior, we saw that he'd just go to the class, do the work, would get the grade, and would just leave, and did not really develop a good relationship with teachers over time. And there was nothing really for the teachers to say there. And that was a big problem, although that student certainly passed the academic review. But I mean, there were other problems to the application as well. But one big problem was that there were no anecdotes to really share with the teachers or things that teacher could really talk about. So here's the homework I want every sophomore and junior listening and to take seriously. By the end of the school year, identify 2 teachers, ideally one humanities and one STEM, who you want to know you, and then actually let them know you. Go to office hours, bring up ideas in class, send them articles, be a real intellectual presence in their classroom. Do it because it makes you a better student. Of course, not just for the letter, but know that the letter is being written slowly every single day. Now let's get a little tactical. Let's say you're a junior watching this, junior year is ending. You need to decide who to ask. How do you choose? Here are the rules. Rule 1, ask junior year core academic teachers. Almost every top university wants letters from teachers who taught you in your junior year in a core academic subject. So the core academic subjects are English, math, science, history, or social studies in a foreign language. Junior year is preferred because it's the most recent, a full year of coursework the admissions officers have visibility into, and because junior year classes are typically the most rigorous before senior year. If you have a teacher who knows you incredibly well, you can sometimes still ask them, but only if you also continue to engage with them through junior year. Sorry, just for a clarification, if you have a teacher who taught you in the sophomore year, you can still ask them. But again, as I mentioned earlier, they should be somebody who you have still been able to engage with and who know you very well. A letter from a teacher who has not seen you in a couple of years or more than a year kind of feels stale. That's why it's recommended that you ask your junior year teachers, and also the courses are more rigorous. And the second role that I alluded to a little bit earlier was ask one humanities teacher and one STEM teacher. Top universities want to see that you can think across disciplines. The standard configuration is one letter from an English, history, or foreign language teacher and one from a math, science, or computer science teacher. Foreign languages are okay, although I do prefer English and history. This signals that you're a really well-rounded thinker who can write, reason, analyze across multiple models of inquiry. But there are some exceptions with specialized programs at schools like MIT. They have specific guidelines for the kind of recommendations that they want. And then there's some other schools as well. So always check the requirements. But the general rule of thumb is one STEM recommendation letter and one humanities recommendation letter from your junior year teachers. Rule 3, pass the enthusiasm test. Now, this is the most overlooked role, and it might be the most important. When you ask a teacher to write a letter, pay very close attention to their reaction. A teacher who says, of course, I would love to, let me know what you need, is going to write you a real letter. Then a teacher who says, sure, I'll try, just send me the link, is going to write you a competent, polite, but a forgettable letter. A teacher who hesitates might actually be giving you a warning, so listen to them. A reluctant letter is worse than no letter. And it's always do the enthusiasm testing, in my opinion. It's very, very important. And the other rule would be diversify what your letters say. Your two teachers' letter should not really say the same thing about you. If both your English teacher and your history teacher are going to write about your writing, this is a wasted opportunity. Try to, ask for letters that would have diversity in there. That's very important. So they talk about different things. When you sit down, you ask yourself, what are the teachers that would bring different things to the table, who would talk about different ways I engage or different parts of my personality. And then I also want to spend a little bit of time on the brag sheet. This is a very, very important part of tonight's webinar. A brag sheet. A brag sheet is a document you give to the recommender to help them write the strongest possible letter on your behalf. Sometimes it's also called a resume. A cover letter is not a resume. It is not your activities list. It's a curated personal narrative document that gives your teacher the raw material you need. They need to write something specific and memorable for you. And the single document is the difference between a forgettable letter and a great one. And so let me walk you through what exactly should be in the brag sheet. The brag sheet should have specific anecdotes from your class, like, how you engaged in the class, what were the things that you did, you also add the traits that you want the teacher to highlight, the personal qualities you want the teacher to highlight. And a lot of times teachers do not remember the very specific anecdotes. So you are able to add those very specific anecdotes, and so the teacher kind of can add them to your letter of recommendation. So let's say you want to talk about teamwork. Now you will say, like, there was this project I was working on with my team, and we were on a time crunch, for example. I helped the team break down the task. So you go into the very specific that the teacher can highlight. Let's say you want to talk about integrity. There was a time maybe the teacher gave you some extra points, and then you went back to the teacher and told them about that. That could be an example of integrity. Obviously, there could be more, but I'm just trying to share that, you first have to highlight the specific traits you want the teacher to highlight, and then you add the very specific anecdotes for each trait that you want the teacher to highlight. Asking for a recommendation letter is actually pretty straightforward. You basically just go to the teacher, share with them your intentions, and if they happily agree, then you go back and work on the cover letter, and then you also you share them that cover letter with them once they have verbally agreed to write your recommendation letter, and then you can also share your resume with them. You could also share more details with them, like the kind of major you want to study in college and other things that you think may be useful. And I'm going to talk a little bit about supplementary letters as well. A lot of schools would allow you to submit a supplementary recommendation letter. You can totally submit a supplementary recommendation letter. But you got to make sure that, they're talking about things that other letters or other parts of your application do not talk about, because in a nutshell, you're taking away time from the admissions officers. So you got to make sure that you're feeding them with some new information about yourself. You're not really sharing the same information that they already know, because in that case, it's just like eating up their time, which they already have very limited to read your application, which is about 8 to 10 or 12 minutes max. For most of the schools, you can submit like 1 or 2 additional recommendation letters. It could be from a research mentor, it could be from an employer, community leader, a coach. And these can actually be of a lot of benefit to you if those recommendation letters are strong and talk about something different about your personality. And finally, the counselor recommendation letter. Almost every top university also requires a letter from your school counselor. This letter is different from a teacher letter. It is meant to contextualize you within your school, to explain your school courses, your rank, your extracurricular impact, the challenges you may have faced, what kind of a community member you are. And the problem is that many counselors, especially at large public schools, may have hundreds of students and they cannot really know each one very well, which is totally okay. Because admissions officers also understand that the counselor does not necessarily have to know very well and know you very well, but they would primarily talk about your choices and talk about your high school context as well, which is pretty important for the admissions officers. And now we're coming towards the closing of our session for today. Let me leave you with 3 things to remember from tonight. 1, your recommendation letters are not a formality. At top university, where every applicant has high grades and high scores, the letters are often what separates one applicant from another, so take them seriously. The second one is really the work of getting a great recommendation letter starts long before you actually ask a teacher. It starts when you are in that classroom. So try to make sure that you show your real intellectual presence instead of being a passive student, because you have to be active in class and should have shown all those traits that we talked about earlier in order for the teacher to write about those. And finally, the brag sheet or the cover letter, which we talked about earlier, it is the highest leverage tool you have to shape your letters. And sometimes students do not write one, and that's a big problem. You should definitely work on those, because those really help teachers to write your recommendation letters and also to personalize your recommendation letters, because it really gives your teacher the gift of knowing exactly who you are and what story you are trying to tell the admissions officers. And here, finally, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and we'll connect with you in our next session. Bye for now.
感谢 Miss Mehr 今天和我们的分享。你有任何的问题，都请来直接咨询文美集团。美国文美集团，美国大学申请规划服务第一品牌，20年经验，万博士领衔常春藤顾问团队，中美双顾问模式服务1个学生，按照大学录取学校排名收费，与孩子形成利益共同体。 华人老品牌，值得您的信赖。文美集团隆重推出 ACAP 大学专业及职业测评规划管理系统，华人升学机构首创，完美解决华人学生最大升学痛点。人工智能提前锁定大学专业方向，提前2到5年布局申请。有了专业测评系统，孩子的课程规划更清晰，活动更聚焦，文书更有故事感，大学申请更有竞争力。5到11年级学生都可以报名参加测评。文美集团1对1非营利组织成立运营领导力项目，让孩子从参与者变为领导者，真正成长、成人、成才进名校。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。文美集团社会影响力联合国网络义工课程，节省孩子时间，做名校认可的社会影响力，高大上义工。5到11年级学生均可报名参加。感谢大家的收看，我们下次再见。